Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about tabletop role-playing games and the 74 to now path. All right, so the 74 to now path is a list of core rulebook tabletop role-playing games. And that core rulebook, if you take that core rulebook, you can play the game. That's all you need, right, to qualify. So this is a list of games from 1974 to 2018, one game per year, right? So this is a list that I have generated, and why would I take the time to generate this? Well, one of the things is I'm a huge fan of tabletop role-playing games, and I just absolutely love them, and it's important to me that we have tabletop role-playing games that are that we know what tabletop role-playing games are out there to play that are great. Not just good, but great, right? And that is increasingly difficult, right? And the reason why is there are a lot of pit traps that keep us from doing that, right? So one, there are well over 1,000 tabletop role-playing games now. That's not even a question. There are easily over 1,000 tabletop role-playing games, which means that if you want to play a good tabletop role-playing game, I would absolutely argue, and I could make this list any day of the week, there are 300 good tabletop role-playing games. That's a huge amount. I think there would probably be 365 good tabletop role-playing games, which means you could play a new tabletop role-playing game every single day of the year. Right now, tabletop role-playing games don't even allow that. Right, most campaigns run anywhere from one-shots exist, but even learning the rules, you could not actually. There's no way you could do that. Right, so there are so many good tabletop role-playing games now that an active, excited dungeon master, game master, or player can't even play them all, right? So 74 to now path is my contribution to the community to say, if you haven't played these, you should play these. These should be on the top of your list, right? Now, I put some, my son is a big video game fan, and he explained Nuzlocke to me. And Nuzlocke is a particular way that you can play Pokemon where you put a limitation on how you play, right? Well, for this list, what I wanted to show is the robustness of the tabletop role-playing game, the full collection of all the games that are out there, and say, these are the highlights, right? And I want to do that in a historical way that shows what was happening in each year, in each decade, and each era since tabletop role-playing games have existed, which started in 1974. So get this, right? So in order to get on this list, you have to have a core rule book, right? So you had to have a core rule book that launched your game, right? Box set also is synonymous with core rule book. You can get on here with a box set, right? But of course, that would be like a starter. Like you need to have that box set and be able to play it, right? And then also this, and I think some people will kind of cry foul, but you'll see why I'm going to talk about why I chose to do this. Once you are on the list, okay, your system, your rules, your genre, your world, your additions, and your company are all suppressed off the list for the entirety of the rest of the list. So once you're on the list, every other new core rulebook that has come out, every other new tabletop role-playing game will come in front of you, right, to get on to compete to be on the list. They won't even compete with you, and you will only be able to get, and a company would only be able to get one company would only be able to get another fantasy tabletop role-playing game, a genre that's already on the list, if there were no core rule books that came out that didn't do something unique in another world, that didn't do something unique in another genre that's not already on the list. Okay, so essentially it has this, and the reason why is that is incredibly limiting, right? So you would think that the list would be, well, there's nothing going to be on the list, but you'll be amazed. Going by those rules, these arbitrary rules that I'm setting for the list, right? The reason I'm doing that is to show the absolute robustness of the tabletop role-playing game market. It is so robust, and so many creators excited to create new worlds, new genres, that the what is being done with tabletop role-playing games today is absolutely explosive. It can't even be contained, right? And so that's really exciting to me. So let's get to the list, right? 1974. Guess what's on the list? Dungeons and Dragons. It started everything. It is the king. It is the big dog, right? Honor to Gary Gygax. It's huge, right? All right. 1975, Boot Hill. Boot Hill was a tabletop role-playing game that dealt with Wild West, right? Now, I'll tell you right now, Boot Hill only made it onto this list because it was 1975. There were virtually no core rule books, new core rules being made, because in 1974, Gary Gygax had just dropped the mic on everybody and, just shocked the world with what a tabletop role-playing game was. A game that was absolutely its own new, unique type of game. Right? There was really nothing like it. All right. 1976, Bunnies and Burrows. This was a tabletop role-playing game that was birthed out of the excitement for Watership Down. And this was a game about rabbits, and it was really amazing. And if you haven't seen it or played it, you should absolutely read it and you should play it. It's really fantastic. It's absolutely my favorite rabbit-based tabletop role-playing game. 1977, no jokes here, Traveler. Boom, man, that thing it's a beast. It is a beast even today. So Traveler is really unique because it is a game that is... it's really unique because it's a sci-fi tabletop role-playing game, and it really introduced science fiction to tabletop role-playing games in a big and extravagant and spectacle way. The thing that's also is it's not based on a property, right? We have lots of sci-fi tabletop role-playing games today that are based on intellectual properties that are external to the tabletop role-playing game hobby, but Traveler is its own world, and there's still a convention today in Lancaster, Pennsylvania that honors that game every single year, right? 1978, Gamma World. Oh, what a game, man! Mutants in the Apocalypse. It is it's really gritty. It's post-apocalyptic. It's mutations, and it was just really awesome new game, right? All right, and then also again, I said that a company's going to be suppressed, the genre is going to be suppressed. Blah blah. Kept going. In the 1970s. A lot of games were kind of pushing up against those rules because there were so few core rule books being really made in the 70s. Because again, the whole world was shocked, right? So Bushido. So 1979, Bushido, and this, in my opinion, it starts the love affair between the tabletop role playing game community and Japan. Like Japan has a way outsourced impact on American tabletop role playing. By the way, this entire list is American tabletop role playing games. Or games that were played played heavily in America, and so, but this American tabletop role playing game community is absolutely swamped with games about or influenced by or using Japan as a spice. We just love Japan, and I'm no exception to this. I'm just absolutely fascinated by Japan, and Americans just really love Japan more than almost many Americans really. We have a special place in our heart for Japan. We just love it because they got samurais and ninjas and Godzilla and a million other cool things, right? Okay. 1980s, Top Secret. This was the introduction of espionage tabletop role-playing games, and Top Secret was big. People were really excited about it. They were, playing CIA characters and KGB characters. Not many people playing KGB characters, but a few people played them, right? An MI6 games you could run with this kind of... Well, let's take MI6 off the list. You'll see why in a minute. But that was a big one, right? So Top Secret was a really big game that came out. 1981, Call of Cthulhu. This drops in. It just echoes itself, across the tabletop role-playing game space. And it was big then, right? And actually, I need to correct myself. I don't think Call of Cthulhu has ever been big, right? What it has been is highly respected. Everybody knows Call of Cthulhu plays in the tabletop role-playing game space. It solidified H.P. Lovecraft's work in the TRPG space, and there's got to be over 100 different tabletop role-playing games that are just Cthulhu-based, right? One of the reasons why Cthulhu is so important now, especially today, is H.P. Lovecraft's work is in the public domain. Call of Cthulhu is really unique as a tabletop role-playing game in that it really is very unique in the tabletop role-playing game space because your characters die really frequently or go crazy, right? So you have to have the most loose grip on your characters of any game that's really in any tabletop role-playing game. The people who play it are ready and willing to have their characters go insane or be killed on a regular basis, which makes it really unique, right? It has currently, to this day, it's gone through 7 editions, and it's still being played today. and it's definitely a favorite within the tabletop role playing game scene. All right, 1982 Star Trek. Okay, now this is really important in my opinion because this is the dawn of licensed tabletop role playing games. I believe when it came out, this was FASA, and it would mark a long running trend within tabletop role playing games, which is licensed tabletop role playing games, and that is a storied history all in of itself. Okay, just tabletop role playing games and licensed property. All right. So next was 1983 continuation of licensed property, James Bond 007. The reason why this is on the list is, one, it was an awesome espionage game, and it just goes to show you we're in the middle of the Cold War. People were thinking about spies, right? And it was super cool because you had tabletop role playing game mechanics for like James Bond's pimped out Aston Martin. Like, it was really unique and special, and also was showing, hey, 1982 Star Trek, 1980 through James Bond 007. It was saying, hey, intellectual properties are going to come to tabletop role-playing games. This is going to be a long-time relationship, right? And it certainly has been. Star Trek was 1982, James Bond was 1983, 1984, Twilight 2000. Twilight 2000 was a really unusual game. It was a military-based game, and also with almost like contemporary type weapons. And I think what really, especially in the 80s, people really cared a lot about, like, how much does a M16 do when it hits? Like, this idea that we want to know what real weapons do how do they act in a TRPG environment. And Twilight 2000 was the first to really go down this road. 1985, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. This is a really unique, wonderful, special tabletop role-playing game that caught the turtles like when they were super, super hot, and it was saying, hey, what about cartoons? What about having fun? What about funny content? And I think, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was super fun, super funny, super unique, animated content. It was a first in a lot of ways, right? It was really unique and special. 1986, GURPS. Absolutely deserves to be on this list. GURPS has literally well over 100 different source books. It's been through multiple editions, and GURPS is the generic universal role-playing system, and it created its own genre. Since then, there have been other games like Cypher that have come out, and like Genesis that do exactly the same thing, allowing you to say, I don't need an intellectual properties, I don't need an intellectual property to officially allow me to tell a story in their world if I'm just playing at my kitchen table and it's just me and my friends, right? Or what if I want to create my own unique world that nobody has ever done? What if I want to do a tabletop role-playing game about sharks? Every player character is a shark living in the deep blue sea. Like, you can do that with GURPS. You can do that with Genesis. You can do that with Cypher. And GURPS started it all, right? 1987, Ars Magica. Ars Magica is the first fantasy-based tabletop role-playing game to veer off in a sharp direction away from Dungeons and Dragons and do something really unique. And Ars Magica went much more deeply into actually emulating medieval, what the medieval years were like, right? Ars Magica is a really special game. It's really unique, and it should be on everybody's to-play list or to own list, right? By the way, there's 44 games on this list, right? So you probably can't play all of these in your lifetime, like because some games it'll capture you and you'll be in that game for a year or two, right? And so it could take 50, 60 years just to play the games on this list, right? All right, 1988, Cyberpunk 2020. Cyberpunk 2020 was really special. It was capturing what William Gibson had done with Cyberpunk, and it said, if there's something new and hot in literature, we can cover this in tabletop role-playing games. The other thing is, I'm going to say this, this was created by Michael Pondsmith, and Michael Pondsmith is really special tabletop role-playing game designer to me, and the reason why is he's black, and the reason why I'm going to say that is he was making games. He made this game in 1988, right? And frankly, we as a tabletop role-playing game community have struggled with having an equal representation with minority creators. We just really, it's not something that is well represented in our history. And Michael Pondsmith was such a powerful force to get that ball rolling in a strong and significant way, right? And I just have huge respect for him, and all his games are on my shelf today. Cyberpunk 2020, Dream Park is one of my my favorites. He did a ton of books for Artalasurian, and he's kind of, in my opinion, he's the Jackie Robinson of TRPGs, and I think that's worth talking about on this list. And this game is super special to me. I love it, and it belongs. Everybody should own this game. Okay, 1989 Shadowrun. One, it's a personal favorite. Two, I think it's just so unique. It's a mixture of science fiction and fantasy. It's really special. It's a wonderful game. It is also famous within the hobby of having one of the absolute best tabletop role-playing game worlds and the absolute worst rule set. Right? It is not great on the rule side, but it's so compelling from the world side that a lot of people love it and play it. And I own every single edition of Shadowrun. It's just an absolute favorite. 1999 Chill. Horror comes to tabletop role-playing games in a way, in a new and broader way. So we already had Call of Cthulhu, but Chill let you play werewolf stories and mummy stories and Creature of Black Lagoon and serial killer stories and all kinds of like Chill was like more open, and it said let's look at horror as a genre and let's allow you to play it. Let's equip you to play horror in tabletop role-playing games. Absolute breakthrough game. 1991 Vampire the Masquerade. Mark Reinhagen. Boom, here you are. 1991. It sets a decade of goth dominance over the TRPG scene with people like, you play that Dungeons and Dragons stuff? I'm going to LARP with my girlfriend this evening. Like the first introduction of I'm cooler than you in the tabletop role-playing game scene. We all know now, dude, we're all nerds. Don't play, right? So, but it was a thing, man. It was a serious thing. It also it was a catapult for LARP, right? So it really established LARP as a major force within tabletop role-playing games. So, 1992, Over the Edge, right? Really unique, weird game. Came out from Jonathan Tweet. He was one of the Dungeons and Dragons designers. To this day, it's one of the most unique games that exist. It takes place in a modern setting, but in a world that has these really strange allusions and analogies. It's really unique and special, and it absolutely deserves to be on this list. Okay, Over the Edge, very unique game. By the way, there's a new version of it coming out right now. 1993, Earth Dawn. So Earth Dawn is in the same world as Shadowrun, right? So here's Shadowrun, and Earth Dawn is a prequel, saying, hey, I set my game in the future, but Earth Dawn is a fantasy-based game in the past, in the same world as Shadowrun. That's really unique. Not a lot of games have done that. Earth Dawn was really special. It also took the fantasy genre and did some really different things with it. It like talked about levels as circles. It was really unique and special. It also was high production value, very, very, very good art, and it was a significant release. So Earth Dawn is really, really special fantasy-based game that did something new. And then 1994, Castle Falkenstein. So Castle Falkenstein is a little bit of a sleeper. Not a lot of people have played that game. It's very Space 1889 like. It was steampunk before steampunk even became a thing. So this was steampunk in TRPGs before steampunk even hit, right? And so like it was a predictive game, right? Of showing you things that were to come, right? And I actually think it really may actually have been responsible in helping helping the overall to grow, to steampunk to grow. 1995, Everway. Everway was a card-based game. So it was using cards to tell stories in tabletop role-playing games rather than dice. And this was the start of people saying, whoa, maybe we can change, maybe, Deadlands used a deck, and all kinds of other cards was like, yeah, what about card-based ways of determining random outcomes? Really, really special from that perspective. 1996, Deadlands. Weird West. Totally unique, never been seen before. You could play a character, you could play a gunslinger who gets shot and comes back as a harrowed. and now you're playing an undead gunslinger. Had stuff that had never been seen before in tabletop role-playing game. 1997, Inomini. This is, Inomini means in the name, right? It was about singing, and it was about angels and demons using singing to destroy each other. So it was this story where you played an angel or a demon, and you would use songs as weapons. It was so unique and so special. It just continued to blow out that idea of what tabletop role-playing games could do, and showing there's no limits. There's no stories we can't tell. 1998, Marvel Superheroes Adventure, another card-based game, right? It was super, super unique and super special. Also, it is on this list because Marvel is a very strange and special entity within tabletop role-playing games. Here we see a situation where you have Marvel, and there were multiple games of Marvel in tabletop role-playing games, honoring that idea of licensed property, right? Right now, no one owns the license for Marvel, and it's highly likely no one ever will again. So we're now in the day of eras where we're saying, is it more of a threat to license people to tell stories in your world, or is it better to to actually have fun with your community? I'm actually amazed that Star Wars still has a licensed game. I'm really amazed about that. But Marvel Superheroes Adventure also ran on a card base, and it had been come from the Dragonlance game, right? Which had brought out this Saga card based game. That Marvel Superheroes Adventure game, believe it or not, I think that could be one of the most valuable tabletop role playing games in the world. As games continue to go forward, buying them in a historical original version. And the reason why is those cards get lost all the time. So getting an actually boxed version of this with the cards is incredibly difficult. All right. Yeah. All right. DC 1999 DC Universe role playing game. 1998 Marvel Superheroes Adventure. 1999 DC Universe role playing games. This is saying TRPGs, comics, we got you. Doesn't matter what which one of the big groups you cover. We're with you. We got you. You got your covered. 2000, Star Wars, right? WotC has this license in 2007. By the way, I'm 100% aware that WEG had made it before this, but in 2000, Star Wars comes out, and they just make a ton of books, and people are playing Star Wars as a tabletop role-playing game. Strong, okay? 2001, Exalted. The White Wolf guys, the same guys who had created Vampire the Masquerade, now bring out their own really unique fantasy world, which is really instilled with ideas from Japan, right? So this is fantasy Japan, and really played like a Supers game. There was really nothing like it before. 2002, Burning Wheel. Luke Crane, he is a major creator. Luke Crane is a very subtle creator. Like, not a lot of people play his games, but virtually every prominent good designer has played his game. And if you are playing games from creators who have not read Luke Crane, you need to check twice. Luke Crane is the absolute Mac when it comes to character to game design. He, in Burning Wheel, changed how people saw rule sets since until now. Like, Luke Crane's influence is in many, many, many games, either noted or unnoted, right? 2003, Fate comes out. Boom. This is big, and because Fate was 2003, it was really big. Fate, we still have Fate today. There's well over 30 different worlds in that game. Fred Hicks has an active system series running with that thing. Fate is really prominent and important today, right? And again, it's just like the GURPS, and it's just like Genesis, and it's just like Cypher, right? 2004, Dogs in the Vineyard, another highly, highly underplayed game. Not many people played it, but the reason why it's on this list is, again, game designers it changed I think player agency, in my opinion, was really born in Dogs in the Vineyard, and player agency is talked about constantly in games, like in every single PBTA game today and in Blades in the Dark, and there was just so much. So this game radiated out influence not to players and game masters, but to creators, to game designers, tabletop role-playing game designers. 2005, Dread. Dread is played with a set of Jenga blocks, right? That's all you got to say. Like, no, but like the idea of we're going to use a board game as our dice system, Like, it's, our random system. It was so innovative. It was really unique, and it's still respected today. 2006, Spirit of the Century, right? So this really birthed the Savage Worlds, the whole umbrella of Savage Worlds. And it was kind of a pulp era game, and we don't have a lot of those on the list. This game provided that. It's a really unique, special, wonderful rule system. 2007, Aces and Eights, another Wild West game. Why does it get onto this list? Innovation. It had a clear layover sheet that you would put over your character, and you would roll dice, and it would say, "You just got shot in the gut," right? And it was really unique and special. And there's nothing like it in any other game. The clear layovers were really cool, and it took Wild West very, very seriously. 2008 Pathfinder. So this is the first time where we saw a major company say, we're shutting down this version, we're bringing out a new version, and then another company come in and say, oh, your company isn't making your game for you anymore? Well, we will skin it and make it for you. That had never happened before. And Pathfinder, the beef between them, Pathfinder and Wizards of the Coast, is still happening today. All right, 2009, Rogue Trader, the start of all the Warhammer 40k tabletop role-playing games. There's been Deathwatch since there. There's been Dark Heresy since there. There's been Black Crusade since then. And this is miniature war games coming to the tabletop role-playing game world. Very unique and special for that reason. 2010, Dragon Age. This is licensed game. No. This is the first really major, extremely well executed video game, tabletop role-playing game that had come out. Now, absolutely, I know StarCraft came out before this, but Dragon Age was done at such a level, such quality, and with such seriousness, not as a side product, not as something else we're doing. But Dragon Age was created in a loving manner, and it showed that tabletop role-playing games could use video games as a source. And even today, we just got The Witcher, right? Like, and a whole bunch of other tabletop role-playing. Elite Dangerous just got made. There's a whole bunch of them, right? 2011, The One Ring. Why is The One Ring on here? Because Middle-earth is important. Tolkien is incredibly important to the tabletop role-playing game. And there has been a drumbeat of Middle-earth games playing. MERP, of course. The Middle-earth game made by Decipher. The D&D 5e material being made in official Tolkien world, all of that, The One Ring holds the idea of Tolkien being on this list. You can't make a TRPG list without Tolkien games based on Tolkien's material. 2012, Dungeon World. Sage Latour, Adam Cobell. This game is brought Powered by the Apocalypse to prominence. And pulled it out of the Apocalypse world where the vast majority of people would have never played the beautiful rules engine of Powered by the Apocalypse. 2013, 13th Age. It brings forward the idea of fronts, right? That comes across many games right now. 13th Age was a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons, and one of many. They literally said this is a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons. This is us making a new tabletop role-playing game saying we love Dungeons and Dragons, and there's a strong tradition of that in tabletop role-playing games. 2014, Firefly, Joss Whedon's classic, right? And Margaret Weiss, the Margaret Weiss company put this out. So Margaret Weiss, here's a woman who's owning and running a company for tabletop role-playing games. There's not a lot of that in tabletop role-playing games. It's very rare. By the way, if you don't know, Paizo had a female CEO. So, this is not a storied history. There's not a lot here. Margaret Weiss her games deserve to be on this list, and Firefly was one of the best. 2015, Cypher System, Monty Cook Games. Monty Cook quit 5th edition to create his own company, Monty Cook Games. Comes out with Cypher System and says, GURPS is dead, right? He didn't say that. I feel like that's what the game was saying, right? And saying, here's another awesome universal role-playing system that you can use to tell any story you want. And right now, Monty Cook is saying, this is how you run an indie company. He is the template for running indie companies in tabletop role-playing game. 2016, 7th Sea makes $1 million on Kickstarter, saying we are a $1 million industry on Kickstarter, and then opening the door for Matt Colville to get $2 million later, right? 2017, Blades in the Dark, John Harper. That story is, Blades in the Dark is about John Harper. I believe that his work, he is the Picasso of tabletop role-playing game designers, and I think he's going to very strongly influence Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. Blades in the Dark has to be on this list, and if you don't own that game, get it today, right? And then last, 2018, Index Card RPG by Hankrin Farinale, Runehammer Games. It is a redux, one of the best reduxes ever done of Dungeons & Dragons. And it opens, and it honors Black Hack and all these other great games that are reduxes of Dungeons & Dragons. That's my list. That's a 74 to now list. Thank you very much for listening, and please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.